Good morning, everyone. My name is Keitha-Gail Martin-Kerr. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm here to share my dissertation work with you this morning. I want to welcome my committee members, Dr. Lori Hellman, who is my advisor, Dr. Mark Vagley, who is my chair, Dr. Jim Bickett. Thank you so much for being a part of my committee, and thank you everyone for being here with me today. The title of my dissertation is Women Who Love Women in Jamaica. So let me tell you a little bit about my background and my journey. I'm Jamaican. I was born and raised in Jamaica. From elementary school through to completing my first degree, I never encountered same-sex families in the school's curriculum. During my high school years, there was a lady in my community whom the community referred to as Man Royal. She could often be seen drinking alcohol in the local bars with men. She drove a tour bus. That was her occupation. She was a bus driver. And rumor had it that she damaged a lot of women and sent them to the hospital. This was pretty scary. So as you can see, where I grew up, homonegativity was laden in our culture. It could be heard in our dancehall music, it could be heard in church sermons, or in casual conversations on the street, or even in whippings given to alleged homosexuals through jungle justice. Jungle justice is the lawless act of community members coming together to punch, kick, beat, stone, or chop to death an individual who they think is gay. Obviously, something is wrong with this. So there's a dearth of research on same-sex relationships in Jamaica. And the majority of the research that has been conducted has been centered on males. My dissertation focuses on the phenomena of women who love women in Jamaica. To date, no study has been conducted in Jamaica that focuses solely on women who love women and their lived experiences in a perceived homonegative society. It is important that the voices of these women be heard and their experiences recognized as their own and not linked with the experiences of homosexual males in Jamaica. The stories of these women need to be heard and validated in order to understand their experiences from their perspective. So this led me to my 3 research questions. My first research question: how might living as a woman who loves women take shape in the Jamaican society? My second research question: how does societal homonegativity shape the lived experiences of women who love women in Jamaica? And my final research question: what are the lived experiences of women who love women in Jamaica? I did an extensive literature review, and as I said, there's a paucity of research about women who love women in Jamaica. I had to extend my literature search to the Caribbean, and even then, I could not find enough literature about women who love women. So I had to then look at 2 countries in Africa, South Africa and Namibia. So from the literature that I reviewed, there were some studies that were conducted in Jamaica by Jamaicans, professors, researchers at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. The first study was conducted in 2011 by Boxwell and his team. They did an island-wide survey and they looked at how homosexuals were perceived in the Jamaican society. The second study was also done. It was a follow-up study to the Boxwell study in 2011, and they did a follow-up study. The same research team did a follow-up study in 2012 to also look at the perception of homosexuals in the Jamaican society, and they also conducted a second survey with some follow-up focus interview. With their research, they clumped males and females together. They did not disaggregate the data to show the experiences of women who love women. Another researcher from the University of the West Indies, Cowell, he has conducted 3 research around this topic of heterosexuality in public discourse. So, Cowell conducted 2 surveys and 1 content analysis, and he was just exploring heteronormativity in the Jamaican society. Charles is another researcher that did a content analysis to explore the representation of homosexuals in the Jamaican society. So these researchers, they have conducted work similar work to what I am doing. I actually contacted Cowell, and he gave me a lot of information about people who are thinking about doing similar research and people who have done similar studies in Jamaica. So yes, there are researchers doing similar work, and based on the literature that I reviewed, I came up with several themes. After reading through the literature, I came up with several themes. The first theme is the law. There's a law in Jamaica that criminalizes male homosexuals, and this law falls under the category of unnatural offenses. So for something to be unnatural, it has to be compared to something that's natural. So if homosexuality is unnatural, meaning heterosexuality is natural. The law actually states whoever shall be convicted of the abominable crime of buggery committed either with mankind or with any animal shall be liable to be imprisoned and kept to hard labor for a term not exceeding 10 years. So if you're caught in the act of homosexuality in Jamaica, you will be in prison for up to 10 years. This law has been inherited from our British system because Britain had colonized us, and that law has been in effect since for 150 years, and it has not been repealed. Britain has, however, forgotten about this law a long, long time ago. The next theme that came up in the research was religiosity. Most studies cited religiosity as a way of being that has been inherited from colonization and used to discriminate against same-sex couples in Jamaica. So for example, Weston Cowell in 2014, they did a study and they concluded that most opponents against gays and lesbians name Christianity as their motivation. Another theme from the research was our music. Our Jamaican dancehall music came up as a predictor of prejudice against homosexuals. Jamaica was the only country in the whole Caribbean. Jamaica was the only country where music was reported as upholding the hegemony of homonegativity. So Weston Houston in 2012 referred in their research, they referred to Jamaican dancehall music as murder music and gay bashing music. The last theme that came up from the research is the idea of heterosexuality. Heterosexuality was dominant in the research. So Jamaica is a heteronormative place where heterosexuality exercises hegemonic control over homosexual presence. So these were some of the themes that came out of the research. Kempadu in 2009. She's a Guyanese researcher, and she also did some work in Trinidad and Tobago. She stated that Caribbean sexuality is rigidly heterosexual and intolerant of sexual differences. So, to answer my three research questions, thinking about the phenomena of women who love women in Jamaica, I decided to do a post-intentional phenomenology study. Post-intentional phenomenology was developed by Mark Vagley. He wrote about it in 2014. And I decided to use post-intentional phenomenology for a myriad of reasons. In post-intentional phenomenology, the phenomenon is always becoming. It's never static, it's never stable. And the phenomenon is becoming in multiple and varied ways. Vaguely describes a phenomenon as always moving, leaking, fleeting, swelling. So this I wanted to capture the woman's lived experiences as it's moving, and it's a social phenomenon. So it's always floating, and I will never be able to capture it. In post-intentional phenomenology, Vagley wrote about a 5-component design for this research methodology. The first component is to identify the phenomena. For me, my phenomena is looking at women who love women in Jamaica who are living in a perceived homonegative society. The second component is to gather data in a very systematic yet flexible way. I'll talk about my data gathering later on. The third component is to make a post-reflection journal, which I did, and I'll talk about that later on also. The fourth component is to read and write my way through the data, and I'll talk about that as I talk about my data analysis. And the last component of post-intentional phenomenology is to craft a well-written text, which I think I did. So my participants were 4 self-identified women who love women in Jamaica. The age range of my participants was 27 to almost 40. My participants lived in neighboring communities on the island of Jamaica. There were 4 participants: Tracy, Aja, Robin, and myself. And at this moment, I'm going to be talking about a little about the 4 participants, so you'll get to know them a little bit more. So Tracy was the youngest participant in my study at the age of 27. She was also the only participant that was single at the time of the study. Even though Tracy self-identifies as a woman who loves women, she has never been in a committed relationship with a woman. Tracy sometimes wears feminine attire if she's in the mood, and sometimes you will see her in more masculine type attire. And I'm mentioning the attire, feminine and masculine attire, because I'm going to be talking about that a little later. The next participant is Aja. Aja has been my best friend since 7th grade. We went to the same all-girls boarding school together. I would describe Aja as being totally feminine. At the time of my study, Aja was in a relationship with a woman for 10 years. Even though Aja has been in this relationship for 10 years, she dated men simultaneously throughout the years. Robin is another participant in my study. Robin refers to herself as a rebel or a thug. She could be seen wearing basketball shorts and white t-shirts. She wears her hair natural, and she normally has it in a ponytail or braided backwards in what she calls a prison hairstyle, a typical African hairstyle with the cornrows going backwards. And as I stated before, I was also a participant in my study. I do self-identify as a woman that loves women, and I would consider myself feminine. At the time of my study, I was in a committed relationship with a woman for 7 years. So data collection. When did I collect my data? I collected my data late winter 2015 to early spring 2016. I had 4 data sources: participants' written memories, interviews, reflection on 2 dancehall Jamaican songs, and my post-reflection journal. The procedure. I went to Jamaica late 2015 to collect my data. I stayed at Ajah's house. Most evenings we would be at Ajah's house because everyone knew that I was there to collect my data. However, no one wanted to have conversations with me, face to face conversations about my dissertation work. So, my participants requested via text, even though we're sitting in the same living room, that I text them the writing prompt. So I text each participant the writing prompt. The writing prompt states, zoom in on one moment in your life when you had to hide your love for women. I also wrote a response to this writing prompt and shared it with my participants, and my participants also shared their response to this prompt with me. I interviewed my participants using semi-structured interview. I asked my participants 5 base questions, and this was done through text messages also, even though we were sitting in the same living room. My next data source is my post-reflection journal. I did an initial entry in my journal at the beginning of my research, and at certain points throughout my research when I was feeling extremely frustrated or extremely excited, or just feeling as if this is not working out, I would write in my journal. My journal served as a data source. And my last data source was 2 Jamaican dance hall songs. My participants and I sat and listened to several Jamaican dancehall music. We voted on our favorite Jamaican dancehall artists, and 2 of the participants voted for Vybz Kartel, which is an infamous Jamaican artist that writes and sings about guns and ladies. And we decided to use 2 of Vybz Kartel's songs as my data point. So, after collecting my data, I read and wrote my way through my data. I also shared my data with Tracy, and Tracy read through part of the data. We discussed the data, and we came up with tentative manifestations. So there are 4 tentative manifestations, 4 findings that showed glimpses into the lives of women who love women in Jamaica. The first finding is fear. So the data I collected strongly suggests that women who love women in Jamaica live with some form of fear. At times, the fear manifests as internal, and other times, the fear would show up as external. So you have Tracy's written memory in front of you. Remember, the writing prompt states, zoom in on one specific moment in your life when you had to hide your love for women. And Tracy responded to this prompt by writing, one specific moment when I had to hide my love for women was when I was much younger, just left college, and my now ex-boyfriend and I were having problems. He's someone my mom loved a lot, and I think it's because he was the reason she thought I was not gay, as she later revealed that same day. I came to her and my sister to talk about the issues I was having with my now ex-boyfriend, and we all had a good conversation about it and laughed, and I made a comment to my mom saying, "Now you're not going to say nothing bad about him." To which she replied, "Don't say that. If he's wrong, he's wrong. But I do love seeing you with that boy because for a long time I thought you were going to be a lesbian." And my sister joined in and agreed that she too thought I was going to be a lesbian. For a moment, I just stopped and looked at them in complete shock, as I was about to take brave heart and say, "So what if I am?" My mom just gave out, "Me no want no homosexual or HIV people around me." and I can't forget how disgusted she looked as she said it. I had to pause and burst out laughing and try not to look guilty by saying to them that I'm not into those things. I'm just a tomboy because I grew up rough with all the boys. At that point, I realized that telling my family how I felt about women emotionally and sexually is going to be a real challenge. So, from Tracy's story, you realize that Tracy feared telling her mom and her sister that she was a woman who loves women, and her mom and her sister feared that she was actually a lesbian. So there was some level of fear in Tracy's written memory. You do not have Robin's written memory in front of you, so I'm going to give you a quick summary of Robin's written memory. So Robin wrote about a time when her girlfriend came to visit her. Her girlfriend lived abroad and she came to visit her. They had a wonderful time on the island, and she brought back her girlfriend to the airport so her girlfriend could board a flight to come back home where she lives abroad. So Robin wrote, I wanted to kiss her so passionately and couldn't because of where we were and the views of my fellow countrymen and women. So this moment in Robin's memory showed that Robin feared showing any form of public affection to her girlfriend because of what probably may happen to her or the girlfriend. The next tentative manifestation, the other finding that came up from the research, was care. So in the data, it showed that women who love women in Jamaica, they cared for their partners, they cared for the women in their lives, and they cared about how they were perceived by their families and how they were perceived by the society. So, for example, in Tracy's written memory, she cared how she was perceived by her sister and her mom. She stated, I burst out laughing and tried not to look guilty by saying to them, I am not into those things. She didn't want her mom and her sister to believe that she was a woman who loves women. So she cared what they thought of her. The third tentative manifestation that came up from the data is the idea of hope. Looking at Tracy's data, there's a lot of hope. Tracy's mother and the sister hoped that Tracy was not one of those women who love women. And Tracy hoped that she could have told them that she was actually a woman who loves women. For example, Tracy wrote, Tracy's mom state, I do love seeing you with that guy because for a long time I thought you were going to be a lesbian. Tracy's mother hoped that she was not a lesbian. The final glimpse into the lives of women who love women is the idea of being diseased. Martin-Kerr did a study in Jamaica in 2005, and they concluded that HIV/AIDS is perceived as a gay disease in Jamaica, irrespective of the population's knowledge about how the disease is spread. And disease also came up in my study. For example, you could look at Tracy's memory. Right there, her mom says, me no want no homosexual or HIV people around me. So she's putting homosexual in the same category as HIV people. She's equating people, women who love women, to people who are diseased. Also, in the Jamaican dancehall song written by Vybz Kartel and Spice, a female artist, Vybz Kartel says, every man fi have a man, every man fi have a gal, and every gal fi have a man. Then Vybz Kartel further went on to state, man to man, gal to gal, that wrong, scorn them. So these women who love women are supposed to be scorned because something is wrong with them, something is abnormal with them. So they're supposed to be scorned. So it's the idea of being diseased. So the four tentative manifestations that showed glimpses of the lived experiences of women who love women were fear, care, hope, and the idea of being perceived as diseased. So I analyzed my data using thinking with theory. Thinking with theory was developed by Jackson and Mazai between 2011 and 2012. And Jackson and Mazai sees data as being partial, incomplete, and it's always being retold and remembered. This aligns with post-intentional phenomenology that assumes that data is always in the process of becoming. According to Wagner 2014, data is always fleeing, eluding, leaking, and slipping. So Jackson and Mazai has this idea of plugging in data into the theory to see what can be produced and infusing the theory into the data to get new interpretations. So for my research, I plugged in my data into three theoretical concepts. One, orientation by Sarah Ahmed. Two, performativity by Judith Butler. And three, the erotic as power by Audre Lorde. And I'm going to be talking about these three concepts now. So orientation by Sarah Ahmed. What is orientation? Orientation for Sarah Ahmed is about sexuality. For her, heterosexuality is vertical and it's straight. Heterosexuality is a straightening device. That is the orientation of heterosexuality. Queer sexualities, such as women who love women, are offline or slanted. So these queer sexualities are reoriented or straightened by heterosexuality to be realigned, to become straight. So that's what orientation means for Sarah Ahmed. So, for example, at the beginning of Tracy's memory, you realize that Tracy stated, one specific moment when I had to hide my love for women was when I was much younger. That's it. The woman was mentioned at the beginning of the story, and this showed Tracy's alignment as a woman who loves women. However, the woman was absent throughout the rest of the story. The woman was unnamed in the story. So, Tracy, at the beginning of her story, she was aligned as a woman who loves women. Her alignment or her orientation was slanted and offline. And throughout her story, heterosexuality was used as a straightening device to realign Tracy. This could be because Tracy's Jamaican and Jamaica is laden with homonegativity, and heterosexuality has a hegemony over homosexuality. So probably that's why Tracy was realigned throughout the story. The next concept that I use is a concept of performativity. And Butler talks a lot about performativity. For Butler, performativity is a construct produced and maintained through gender. So, gender is performed by male and female through bodily gestures, styles, movements, and language. These acts must be constantly repeated for one to be identified as masculine or feminine. So, looking at Tracy's story, she mentioned that she burst out laughing. She didn't want to look guilty. So, she said, I'm just a tomboy. So, Tracy's bodily gestures did not identify with being female and being feminine, nor did it identify totally with being male or being masculine. Tracy's performativity tried to disrupt the gender binary of being feminine and being masculine, and this confused her sister and her mom. So this is there's a possibility here why her mom and her sister would say that they thought that she was a lesbian. The final theoretical concept that I use to make sense of my data is Audre Lorde's concept of the erotic as power. For Lorde, the erotic is powerful for women. Women use their erotic power when they share their deepest feelings with another human being. Women use their erotic power when they're honest about how they're feeling deep inside. When women use their erotic power, they demand the most of themselves and their lives. They feel satisfied. They feel fulfilled. So, looking at Tracy's story, she was laughing and having a great conversation with her mom and her sister at the beginning of her story. Tracy was using her erotic power at that moment to get satisfaction and fulfillment. However, throughout her story, Tracy denied being a woman that loves women. She was dishonest about her sexual orientation, and there Tracy started losing her erotic power. So this shows that women who love women in Jamaica, they have this erotic power that they use to gain deep satisfaction, and at times they also deny their erotic power, or they remain powerless because they want to be loyal to their families or the views of the society. So I did a qualitative research, post-intentional phenomenology research. There are limitations to my studies. The limitations to my studies are several. One, I was a cultural insider. I'm a Jamaican and I'm studying my culture. I knew a lot about my culture. So there could be some form of subjectivity right there. The second one, I was a participant in my study. So the personal is then being academic, and there could be a lot of subjectivity right there. The third one, I was studying only females. The fourth one, I was studying one region in Jamaica and just one island in the Caribbean. So there are several limitations to my study. So because of these limitations, my study is not generalizable. However, there are still implications for my study because I collected dense and detailed data about the lived experiences of these women, and these stories are worthy to be shared. So the implications for my study are three that I came up with: implications for policymakers, implications for teaching and learning, and implications for future research. So the first one, for policymakers, findings from my study support the existing research that suggests that the current heteronormative policies in Jamaica are punitive and discriminatory towards women who love women. There's a possibility that if some of these policies change, the public's view of women who love women will probably change. The next implication is for teaching and learning. Students should be given the opportunity to learn about people who are similar to them and also people who are different from them. As Lee Galda states, and also Bishop states, the school's environment and the school's curriculum should serve as a mirror and a window for students. Meaning, as a mirror, students should be able to look at the school's environment and the school's curriculum and see what they value and see what they represent. And they should also be able to look through the school's curriculum and the school's environment and see the values of other people. Therefore, students should be educated to value differences and not view differences as deficits. So, for future research, other qualitative research needs to be conducted using different methodologies such as narrative inquiry, case study, and other ethnographic methods to capture the richness and gain further insights into the lived experiences of women who love women. Other philosophical and other theoretical concepts could be employed to make meaning of the lives of these women. Researchers could ask similar questions or different questions to further explore the lives of these women. In concluding, it's my hope that this research will generate further lines of inquiry pertaining to women who love women in Jamaica. I'm hopeful that my study will begin to disrupt the heterosexual homosexual binary that is being so normalized in Jamaica. And most of all, I hope that my study makes the stories of women who love women in Jamaica a part of our nation's stories that are worthy to be told and heard. Thank you so much for coming today. If there are any questions, I'm willing to answer them. Thank you.